welcome back, listeners, to another interesting conversation on the BizBlend podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and today, we're joined by someone who just doesn't talk systems, he scales them. So, listeners, let me ask you, what if the real edge in high performance isn't intensity, but it is consistency? Now, our guest, Willy Kuhne, he's a vendor operations lead at Google Ads, running high functioning teams across continents. He's also the mind behind Nortehaus, a design driven boutique retreat space in Canada, and an athlete competing in high rocks for fun and for focus, obviously. From tech, travel to training, we will be unpacking how the best performers, they don't just push harder, they show up smarter. So let's quickly get into this very interesting conversation. So, Willie, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really excited to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation we're gonna have.
Absolutely. Um, Willie, before we dive deep into your journey, I mean, you work across different continents, teams, and then time zones. Um, what are the core systems that you would rely on to keep consistency from becoming chaos? Because it can be really overwhelming. It can soon turn into a complete mess. So, I mean, if you can share those core principles or fundamentals.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of lessons that had to be learned on the way, and living in various cultures and immersing myself in different nationalities across the globe. There's obviously different streams of learnings and different ideas that are bombarded at you consistently, right? So
Mhm.
it took me a long time to figure out what is my philosophy. So I had my philosophy shaped through the different experience that I had across the globe. And
Mhm.
essentially it came always back to three fundamentals for me, which is you gotta be useful, you gotta be consistent, and you have to focus. And all of those three aspects and every job that I did, whether I did that at Google or I did that in my time outside of Google when building nortehaus, for example, there was always amongst these three core components that really helped me to get it done. So that experience helped me get there, and it was the building blocks for what I like to call the standard of consistency. But it all came from the idea of, okay, you got to be useful, you got to be consistent, and you got to be able to focus.
Hmm, that's interesting. And um, anything specific or very surprising that any particular place taught you? Like, do you have any story or a moment like that?
But many different moments, and I think um, if I think back, look, I grew up in Germany, not in the western side of Germany, but in the eastern side of Germany. So when I grew up, life was changing rapidly. I would never compare this to, for example, early 90s in somewhere in Southeast Asia or in South America. Certainly very different living conditions, but yet a
Mhm.
very intense, rapid change of a country that was embedded into socialism, communism to an extent, integrating into a Western capitalistic society. Obviously, was a lot of change. Um, so going into the world, come from Germany, you're already to some extent more privileged than, for example, some other countries because you come from a good barebone. But I just wanted to differentiate between growing up in West and East Germany. That was still a little bit different when we think about Germany today. But I think
Mhm.
what struck me the most, this is why I was alluding to the point just now, is when I lived in the Philippines. I
Mhm.
remember that the people that had the least measured by the goods, so what they have, the size of the house they have, and whatnot, they
Mhm.
often had the biggest smile on their face, no matter what. And that taught me a completely different lesson at that time. That um, happiness was just not just about material goods, but it was oftentimes about the community, the people that are around you, the stories that you're able to create. And even if people don't have very much in terms of goods, I always found that we're still very happy in the community, very happy with the people that we're surrounded by. And so that was a big learning lesson for me and in my life. This living abroad in various different places, the Philippines was the biggest eye opener for me.
Wow. That's a beautiful, beautiful one, really. Beautiful one, and it's practical, yet it's so endearing. Um, and as you mentioned that you grew up in Germany, what was it like? I mean, how did that early environment shape your relationship with the structure, um, culture, or even ambition?
Yeah. In so I want to go a little bit into this framework, and then I'm going to bring it back to your question. Because the if we think about the standard, we think about or the standard of consistency, we think about it as a three-layered pyramid. On the first level, we have the standards, which is the elementary base of what are your standards? What are your non-negotiables? Do you know yourself? Do you know the people that you're working with? Can you lead authentically within that
Mm,
space? That all falls into the bucket or the box of standards. On
mm,
top of that, you have structure, which is are you able to build a clear rhythm, whether that's a communication rhythm, like a flow of how you operate through the week? Do you have
mm,
clear roles and responsibilities? And does everybody know what they need to do? And where do we need to get to? So essentially the structural element. And the last one on top is the sharpening, which is consistently developing skills, questioning the status quo to make sure is, hey, are we on the right track? Do we need to pivot? Are we still moving in the right direction? Um, if you think about that as a leadership framework, what I learned from growing up in East Germany was the structural piece, right? And I think maybe that's also a little bit stereotypical, but I think in Germany, we're very good when it comes to structure. We're very much by the book, oftentimes too much by the book. But in business, if I've learned over the last 15 plus years is that if you are able to instill a solid structure, a clear structure, you can
mhm,
actually move with more clarity, more consistently, and drive much more and very better outcomes than if you were to operate in some sense of chaos. And so for me,
mm,
it it was an honest learning in East Germany. We didn't have that many things compared maybe to other Western European countries at that time, but it was of course opening the doors to the West and growing rapidly. But I always had a sense of you got to be structured. You got to be here on that day. You got to do this on that day, and that helped me. Just like humans are creatures of habit, right? So that helped me as well in learning very early about structural systems at least.
absolutely, absolutely. Uh, I mean, you know, uh, from where we are, it doesn't just shape us. It sometimes, limits or liberates us. So, I
It
think,
does both. Yeah.
yeah, our listeners will definitely connect with that. Um, and was tech always part of the plan for you, or did your path into Google it happen more organically, or maybe by chance, or maybe by acquaintance or networking, connecting with someone?
That's a good question. That was completely by chance. And if you would have talked to me maybe 20 years ago before going anywhere out into the world, I would have told you that I was never destined to work for a company like Google. It didn't look for the longest time, it didn't look very good. I think my grades in the ninth grade were how do I explain it best? Probably rebellious, always close to failure, testing myself quite a lot there. And
Okay.
uh, only when and I think that was around it was around the 10th grade when I decided to go to a foreign exchange program by chance. My English back in the day was horrific. I could barely order myself a tea and maybe ask, "How are you?" And that would have been it. And I went for an exchange to the US, and that moment literally changed everything because that moment I left on my exchange program to the US is the day that I basically never returned. I loved it so much to be immersed in different culture. It was so much more practical in terms of learning versus the theoretical side of what you often have in Germany, which is if it's on the like you write it on the whiteboard or you take notes, and it's very structured learning, but it's not very much learning by doing. And the US was the other way around. I would have a math class and then I would go to a gym class that was weightlifting at that time, which was like, wow, you have that in school? That's crazy. And you would wrap up your day with a TV production class where you would cut and edit videos, which was, again, compared to Germany, where you would have chemistry, physics, and all the basics. It was complete
Mhm.
madness to me that that was considered school. But I found myself so much more in that environment, and I felt very comfortable that I would not say the US school system is equivalent to the German school system, at least not in high school. I think it is a little bit easier. But immediately I became from a barely passing student to a flying A student in the US. And I felt so much more in touch with myself and who I was that I wanted to stay and figured out how to extend my stay with my host family, negotiated that I spend time with them. I support them at home. I work as part of the landscaping business, and in return I get a room. And so what essentially happened is that these lovely, amazing people that they took me in for over 5 years, and I finished my high school and my bachelor's in the U.S. before I then moved back to Germany for my master's for 1 year, but not moving back home. I moved to Cologne and did a master's in international management. And only then somebody posted in some forum that Google is hiring account strategists in Dublin. And to me, that was like, well, I'm gonna just try and see if it works. And I remember that 2 or 3 weeks later, after I applied, I got an email back. It's like, we would like to invite you for an interview. And I was like, what? That's wild. And again, like a couple of years ago before that, it was never destined for me to work. So that's why I would say it was more by chance than, or not by chance, but I had to create my luck and I had to put a lot of work in my luck unknowingly, but it put me on the right direction.
No, no, that's definitely. I mean, we have to create our own luck. That's what I've also learned across the years, growing up. That
And it's you know what? It's always tricky to say you have to create your own luck. And
yeah,
so I first of all agree with what you say, and then secondly, I would say you have to put yourself in moments where you are able to receive that luck. Meaning, you have to get a sense for: is this an opportunity? Is this something that I want to do? Is this can I put myself, if I learn X, Y, and Z, does that put me into a better opportunity so that I can receive other opportunities where I maybe can consider to be a little bit more lucky, so to say. I think those things go together. I would not advise anybody that you're going to be more lucky from one day to the next, but you can increase your chances of becoming more lucky by putting yourself out there a little bit more.
sure, definitely, and definitely your journey is it's layered. It's far more layered, and thank you for sharing that, Willie. Now let's talk about the you know high performance as well, um, because you have worked globally. So I think that brilliantly gives a very nuanced and a deeper perspective into this. So, in your experience, Willie, what's the biggest myth or misconception people believe about high performance? And what actually drives results over time? Is it a talent, skill, focus? What exactly does it?
Yeah, I think there's many people with many different answers. Also think that there's no right way to high performance, if I may say so. Some will say that it's the endless hustle, going 80, 120 hours a week nonstop and going at it. And it may work for who they are. Um, and for others, it may be, and they need to operate in structures, allowing them to operate on a high performance. Others may say they operate at high performance in highly effective teams where they know that the individuals of that team can support them in their tasks, and as a collective they're able to drive the highest possible performance. So I think there are different roads to get there, and I would not necessarily sit here and say there is a right or wrong way. But it brings me back to point one. You have to be very clear on who you are as a person, right? You have to be in touch with what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, how do I operate? And if I operate in a team, it's not exclusive to if you are a team player or not, but if you are operating in a team, are you aware of who your team is? Are you aware of the people that who you're working with, what their triggers are, what their metrics are, that what the success drivers are, right? And I think that fundamentally is the base layer to understand, first of all, how do you drive high performance or high performing team. For an individual like me, and this is what I can share as a learning. It's operating in environments where I know my own strength, know my own weaknesses, and I can build structures around that, or I'm allowed to build structures around that that allow me to give my best, especially where I'm good at. So if I'm good at, let's say, positivity, or I'm good at being analytical, I'm able to put the best out there and in a space where I'm able to operate in. So talking about the limitations that we did earlier, for example, it is not about the structure shouldn't limit, but it should be a structure that allows me to bring out the best I can in terms of my analytical thinking, to add to whatever that performance outcome looks like.
Hmm, definitely. And uh, um, to sustain real excellence, I think there are so many factors playing across here in this equation. And
Yeah.
you have said, Willie, that consistency, it is standard. It's not a rule. And that's powerful, because it can be defined in so many ways. So, how exactly have you arrived at this? And what does it look like in practice? That's what I mean to ask.
Yeah. So first of all, how do you main the first question, I think, is how do you maintain it?
Yeah.
Is is how can you learn and adapt fast enough
Hmm.
without losing who you are? Because there are certain strengths that you bring as an individual. So the question is like, how can you adapt and pivot in moments and stay agile? I think now we're moving into a space of AI. I think there's a lot of fear out there of what AI takes from us, what it adds to us. But I think first of all, you have to be clear is again, who are you? What are your strengths? What you bring to the table? How can you adapt within those elements? So if I talk about the standard of consistency, those three layers, this is the very, very top part of it, of where you have to understand is what are your skills, what are your skill gaps, and being able to navigate that, meaning if I understand that I have a certain gap in a certain area, am I able to upskill myself and make sure that I can move and pivot into the right direction? Or if I understand that my team, okay, my team has a gap in X, Y, and Z, am I able to invest into them and into the growth of my team so that, again, we can all be very clear about the bottom of the pyramid, which are our standards, our non-negotiables, and the structure that we're working in. So I think those elements are super important, especially in a world that is changing faster than ever. I think we can all agree to that. This is
Mhm.
going back to the literally the fundamentals consistently, which means standards, structure, and how do you sharpen those two things at all given times.
Mm. And I really love this because um, even if talent is there, I think uh, I believe that consistency and discipline, and that can be really really boring because you have to keep on doing the same thing every day. You have to keep showing up every day, and that can sometimes be really, really daunting.
Yeah.
um, However, it needs really a lot of mental strength, of course, physical as well, but moreover, it really needs a lot of mental strength, and it also involves the element of integrity. And I would love to know, Willie, your take on how it works in, like, messy, uh, bigger teams, enterprise level teams. Uh,
Yeah, it's a very similar approach. So structure, consistency, 100% on paper can be boring.
Mhm.
That's why I think it's super important to work towards a common vision, a big goal, a shared outcome, any of those things, but be very clear about what you want to achieve. So for sports teams, it could be winning a championship. For a sales team, it could be winning the quarter, for example, on whatever your sales metrics are. That has to be clear. And there are certain elements that you have to do as input, right? Like the best players in the world that train hard, they make sure they are staying true to their standard, which may not be drinking alcohol in that example, or maybe eating clean food or minimizing carbs, whatever it is. They operate in a clear structure. They wake up at 5 a.m. They may shoot some hoops at that time. They may go back to weight training at 8 a.m. They have a little bit of time for rest before they go to team practice in the afternoon. And
Mhm.
they keep adapting from the skill ups and mistakes by looking at match films, getting specific coaching 101. And it's not very different than what you have in the business environment, which is the shared goal maybe to win the quarter, which means if you we want to win the quarter, we have to be a collect like a team that adds at as a collective. Always love this idea of like greatness is in the agency of others, right? So you work together towards fulfilling that common quarter goal that may be hitting quota 110% or whatever it is. But you can't get that done if to first to operate as a team, you need to know your team. Then, if you operate as a team, you need to figure out what is the best structure we can work in. When do we have our team meetings? When do we have our one-on-ones? When do we have our coaching sessions? It's that same rhythm as the professional sports player has that is trying to figure out when do I shoot my hoops? When do I do team practice and whatnot? Those elements are very similar. And then it's the same, whether you work in-person sales, phone sales, whatever my environment it is, I believe there's absolutely an opportunity to get coached, especially on specific skills. Listen to your own recordings, listen to your own tape, ask a friend or not a friend, I guess that doesn't work in the business context, but ask a colleague or your manager to observe you in a high-pitched sales meeting and give you feedback afterwards. Those elements keep the needle moving and also make you better as a person. And best of all, ensures that your team, in the end of the day, is able to hit their vision, their shared goal, the targets, whatever it may be.
Definitely. That's quite a clear description, and picturization as well, when it comes to consistency. Um, and Willie, before we wrap up here, I couldn't skip this part, but how has fatherhood changed the way you lead, prioritize, or even define success? Because parenthood, it definitely brings such a beautiful and, sometimes really complex uh, element into in a journey.
It does. Yeah, it's a good question. How did it? It has made me more patient overall. I used to operate within this framework we've talked about a little bit today, but I also used to work with it. It's like, okay, I need this somehow done tomorrow. Um, Fatherhood has taught me a lot of patience, has taught me to slow down, look at the world from a completely different awe, and I had to become a better active listener. There's lots of elements that actually flow into this, but I think if you are a good parent, I think you're not far away from being a good leader, probably as well.
Mm, that's lovely. That's lovely, Willie. And I think parenthood, it just not only rewires not just schedules but values, and that's I think there are so many parallels actually between parenthood and leadership.
Yes.
It, if you're leading a team or not. Great.
Yes.
So in the interest of time, Willie, before we wrap up, if the listeners they would like to connect with you, what would be the best way?
If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on my website, which is thisiswilly.com, or through any of my socials that are also linked there.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to have all the details in the show notes for our listeners. And Willie, this was really such a real talk on journeys, um, you know, ups and downs, flaws, system standards, sustainable performance. I mean, this was like a chat, and thank you so much for showing us how excellence isn't just what you do, it's more about how you do it again and again and again, and you show up for yourselves and for others.
Thank you so much for having me, Sana. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. So, listeners, whether you are leading global teams, launching your own venture, or simply trying to train your mind to show up stronger, today's episode reminded us that consistency isn't about perfection, it is about integrity. Until then, this is your host, Sana, and this has been BizBlend. Thank you.